Won't you take me back to Tennessee?
The award-winning Tennessee WildCast is on the air with the latest info about hunting, fishing, boating, wildlife watching, and all things outdoors. This episode is brought to you by GSM Outdoors, whose vision is to preserve the sportsman's legacy, fuel innovation, and enable the next generation of outdoor enthusiasts. Think outside. That's where you'll find us. Now, make welcome your host, Jason Harmon.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this edition of Tennessee WildCast. I'm glad you're tuning in. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. This one will be pretty wild because we're talking about something that I'm not very familiar with, mushrooms. Matt lined this up. Matt Cameron helping me co-host today. We're in Morristown, Tennessee, and looking forward to this show.
Yeah, this is when the novice comes in and your expert novice professional title, correct?
Don loves to introduce me as the expert novice, and I'm definitely the novice today.
That makes two of us, but we do have a fun guy that's going to talk mushrooms with us today.
There you go.
Thank you. I'm here all week.
Yeah. Jeffrey Collins Key, right?
Yes,
is
sir.
our guest today, and he is, we've been chatting for a little while. Really fun guy, I believe.
Indeed, with a lot of knowledge about a subject that most people don't know much about, and quite frankly, scares me.
Yeah, me too. He is a forester for North Cumberland Wildlife Management Area, and appreciate the work that you're doing there. But Jeffrey, give us a little bit of your background before we dive into these mushrooms and talking about that. Your work background, your outdoors background, that kind of thing. I'd love to hear about that.
Sure, man. I do appreciate the intro as a fun guy as opposed to an expert, because I'm certainly not that. I am a Knoxville native, born and raised out there, UT graduate as well.
Go Vols.
I actually still live in South Knoxville. I've got a wonderful wife, two great children, and, man, I really couldn't ask for a better setup as far as a career either.
Awesome.
So I've spent the last year with TWRA of North Cumberland, like you said. 6 years before that, I spent with Tennessee Division of Forestry over at Chuck Swan, which is a state forest and a WMA.
Right.
Man,
Here we
Just
are.
loving life.
It was in the
There it
restaurant
is. Here we
business
are.
for 20 years before
yes.
working for the agency.
Yeah, actually, I was. Did a lot of fine dining and such before that, and my specialty was event planning, banquet service, more of the private dining mentality.
So not serving mushrooms up to people.
Not actually. Occasionally they were on the plate. We had some good chefs. Can't argue that in the least.
But nothing to
But
do with why you got into what you're doing.
They didn't
now.
have a guy bringing them chicken in the woods and morels mushrooms in the back door and cooking them up. There are a few great restaurants in Knoxville and around the area that'll do that. More than mom and pop situations, but no, you don't get that too much in the big chain ones.
A delicacy.
Well,
Sure.
Real quick though, before we dive into some of this other stuff, hunting and fishing. Is that any in your? Did you grow up hunting and fishing and love to do that?
No, I actually never had a hunting license, never had a fishing license, never have done either, honestly. Or it was like that back, with the exception of the uncle with my, taking on a fishing trip when I was like 7, maybe 8. Now, but I don't know if I can count that, honestly, because I didn't catch squat.
Yeah, that's more.
So,
that was
I went
fishing.
on the boat with him, we'll say.
Well, that's cool. That's interesting.
It's nothing I'm opposed to, man. I'm really on board with it, in all honesty. It's a great feature to have in the forest, but it's just not something I do.
That's cool.
What do you do in the forest now for the agency?
So my role's basically large-scale habitat management, we'll call it, whether it be through a timber harvest, which that could be a clear cut, which doesn't sit well with others, but there's also so much more that can be done with forestry, whether it be a thinning, to open up an understory, to get rid of invasives, to do a prescribed fire. We can, we'll reroute roads, we'll coordinate, and some of us are actually signed up to help with some of the elk hunts and stuff, because we have that feature to branch out to the other divisions within North Cumberland.
Oh, there's no doubt that some of the positions across the agency cross paths. You got fisheries guys helping with the wildlife guys and vice versa. And,
Oh, yeah.
The expertise and the knowledge inside the agency, these guys and gals can cross paths and do different things.
It's exciting. It's a break from the norm to get to cross over and do something that you don't do on a daily basis.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Well, that's cool. That's cool to hear that, not everyone that works for the agency has hunted and fished or is really into that. So that's cool. Each to their own. And I think it's cool that you enjoy being outside and working with the lands that or to make better habitat for these creatures we love to hunt and fish for and just watch. So anyway, awesome. Growing and culturing mushrooms. I know very little to nothing about this, so this is a good conversation for us to have today. I guess first start out with the types of mushrooms that you like to work with, and maybe let's just start there.
Yeah, we want to hear about the kind that you can safely eat. And when we started this, I think Jason and I were under the impression that you were going to tell us which ones to look for in the woods, collect, and kind of start your own mushroom farm, for lack of better words, from that. But fortunately, it doesn't really involve that. It involves a safe source of mushrooms that aren't going to kill you or get you high. So we're a sigh of relief, so to speak.
Yeah.
Tell us how this works.
Yeah, now there's no psychedelic element to this. You may put yourself into a food coma if you eat a bit too much of it. But
I've been there a few
as
times.
far as, visiting outer space, this is not going to do that for you. We can talk about, the foraging mushrooms and stuff. There's a bunch of those out there. A lot of those have been transferred over to varying levels of success to this cultured, a slightly more controlled situation that we're talking about here, where you know where these mushrooms are coming from. You know that the cultures you're getting are going to be a species that you can eat, and exactly what species that is you'll be getting.
Outstanding.
So it does remove, like you said, you may be 1,000% sure, but you just don't know. You don't want to be. I don't want to be the smartest guy in the room on food I've never tasted before.
Mm-hmm.
I want somebody else to help and coach me through that, preferably somebody that's got some good training.
No doubt. So take us where you want us to go on this, brother.
So the mushrooms that we're going to be talking about are shiitake mushrooms, oyster mushrooms. Those are going to be the two primaries. Now, a lot of this other stuff will work as well for chicken of the woods, hen of the woods, lion's mane. What else we got out there? Reishi. You can do that with that as well. So there's a broader range than just the shiitake and oysters. I mainly focus on those because those are generally the ones you can do the most control with as far as when you can get your fruiting cycles, and you have the most regular fruiting cycles from them.
How often is a fruiting cycle? I have no clue.
That's kind of up to you with the shiitake, a little with the oyster, based on how often you can, what they call force. That's kind of one of the back into the processes once you've done all the other steps we haven't quite talked about yet. But you can force it and kind of set up a schedule. And some of that you can get going on a 4 to 6 week rotation. You're going to shorten the life of the log, but you can, if you want to do a little farmer's market, or if you want to have that consistent element on your table, you can kind of set up a schedule. Oysters, you can a little bit. The other ones we mentioned, the lion, the hen, the chicken, those are still kind of more of a seasonality, even if you do inoculate them. But all those species we mentioned can't go into every kind of wood. You're going to have varying levels of success. Your shiitake, they like your harder woods. So you're talking your hickories, your oaks, your hard maples. Your oysters like your thinner woods. So you're talking about your poplars, your red maples, your tree of heaven, if you want to start hammering on those. So for me with forestry and tying it into forest health, you can actually remove invasive species or less desirable species for your wildlife and not have that dead material on the ground. Now, if you set up certain ways, that dead material works great for, blinds and habitat, but it also, depending on how much you have, creates a fire risk or just visualization.
So real quick, let me jump in here.
Do it.
And if I'm, just so I'm clear, you're growing these mushrooms in a log.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's jump back to the process, of starting this. So is it kind of like a garden? I mean, you prepare your log and then you plant your spore, I guess, at this point. And then do you cover that with a little bit of dirt and fertilize it, or just talk us through it? Yeah,
kind of. So we've talked about the species of mushrooms. We've talked about the species of wood. All right, so let's say we're going to do shiitake.
Okay.
So I've got my shiitake spawn. Most of us don't want to cut our oaks. They're more of our longer-lived trees. We like our oaks. We really do. So What about your hickories that you may not want out there? Or what about your sugar maples that are out there? Those sometimes you want to remove. And there's a great example is the ones you can use for shiitake. So for me, an ideal log is roughly about 6 inches in diameter and about 30 inches or so long.
Okay.
So a manageable chunk of wood here, not a huge
Right.
blow
The
down
bigger
tree.
you get, I mean, this is wood. It's not light. I mean, we're talking about these hardwoods, which tend to be dense as well. And then at some point, I'm going to tell you to soak these suckers in water for 24 hours. And then, if you're talking about this 36-inch log that's 3 feet long, like, you're going to need some friends to get that done. So,
Strong friends.
exactly.
A creek or something.
Dedicated, good friends. So, the size log that I'm talking about is much more manageable for an individual. So once you have your log and you've got the size you're after, you picked up your spawn. Spawn comes in 2 different forms. I start with either the sawdust or the plugs. A plug is essentially a wooden dowel. Both of these have been sterilized and inoculated with shiitake spawn. So we're just talking the mycelium, the below ground. That will colonize that wood or that sawdust. And that is the material that you will use to put into the non-sterile logs. That's why I like starting here, is because this is the place you start where you're not sterile. Everything else beforehand, you're in hood vents, you're in climate control, temperature, ventilation control. There's also a lot more revenue built into that front-end process. So I try to stay away from that, honestly, because it's too cost prohibitive for myself and anybody I know, and I want to do this in a low cost, low impact way. And when I say low impact, I mean low manpower.
And is this more of an organic way of doing it, I guess you could say?
Yeah.
And is the other process considered organic? I mean, it probably is, but does that make sense? Is that?
I hear you. That depends on a lot of the individual's processes, so I can't answer that because it's done differently for different companies.
So these could be grown in a controlled environment, inside, indoors, in a hood or something, but you're doing this all outside,
right?
On a log.
On a log. Yeah. I'm not sterilizing this log. I am not wearing gloves. I am not cleaning my drill bit in between the processes. So I've got this. I prefer to use the wooden dowels, just because I have children that come to these classes. My son helps me, and there's a little less materials needed to do this process. On the lower end, the wooden dowels is the way to go.
What size of dowel?
The wooden dowel, it's already. You actually don't have to do that. That's all done for you because you purchase the pre-inoculated bag.
Gotcha. Okay. Spores are in that, ready to go.
Right. So that bag is roughly 500 wooden dowels. They're about $30 for the whole bag, and that will give me 14 to 18 logs probably.
Oh, wow.
That's cool. Yeah.
That's a lot more than I envisioned.
You're looking at 3 to 6 years worth of production, depending on how you take care of these logs. So you're looking at on a fair size log, you're looking at about a pound of production off each log as well. So this is a perpetual food source you've done for yourself for $30 for the spawn, for the drill bit, and for the wax. Everything else is manpower.
Where's the wax come into play? What does that do?
The wax comes into play as a barrier. So that when you put that wooden plug in, your goal is for that wooden dowel to sit there long enough and transfer the mycelium over into the wood.
Ah.
That wax allows for you to plug it up, protect that moisture, and to keep birds and insects out of it long enough because they will go in there and eat that spawn.
I got you. I'm following now. I think I'm following here.
Starting to come together.
Yeah. I can see this happening.
So if that wax falls off 6 months later, that's fine. It will. It's not a perfect situation, but that main transfer, that whole major part of it, got locked in. So I've got my shiitake. I've got my oak log. You're looking at roughly about 4 inches in separation per
plug.
Per plug. Thank you. And it's going to be kind of set up in a diamond pattern. So you kind of offset. So you start one row, and the next one is offset by 2 inches, but you're still. That's the 4 inches.
4 inches, yeah.
And you can get really specific and measure this out to a scientific level, or 4 inches.
Yeah. Whatever this is.
Just bullhorns and
Now this
4
isn't
inches.
this isn't Longhorns. This is
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, this is
Rock and roll.
I said I was UT, not that UT.
yeah, exactly.
How deep are you drilling these holes?
You want to go just as deep as the wooden dowel.
And roughly how long are they?
They're roughly about an inch.
Okay.
So you can,
Pretty small hole.
if you go deeper than that, you've got an air pocket behind it that's working against you. It's not the end of the world, but it's not what you're after. You're spending money on this, you're trying to feed yourself with it. So setting yourself up in a better situation is what you want to do. It's essentially like not packing the soil after you plant something. You've got a risk of drying out that root.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I've done my start on my diamond pattern. I've set it up with the wax, and it's really just enough. If you want to stay organic, I'd recommend the cheese wax. But Gulf wax, paraffin wax is an edible wax. It's just not technically organic. The cheese wax has a higher melting temp. So when it's 99 degrees outside in July, that paraffin has a risk of just kind of falling off, whereas that cheese wax is going to hold on there just a bit longer.
Interesting. How does cheese wax get its name? Is it made from cheese?
It's the wax that goes around the cheese.
That's right. Okay, cool. There you go.
Yeah. So if you're really fancy, and you have you usually eat the cheese and then use the wax.
Gary said that.
That's a lot of baby bells for me. So I just buy mine.
Awesome.
So you've waxed the holes up. You got your dowels, diamond pattern, everything's set.
Yeah.
Do you just leave it out in the elements, walk away, and come back how
Kind of, sort of, mostly.
long? No parental care involved in it from that point forward?
Right. So at this point, you've got it set up. You've got the majority of your labor done. Honestly, at that point, I'd set it out for about 6 months or so, kind of just straight out like firewood.
In the shade or the sun, or does it matter?
It does matter, actually. The one at Chuck Swan is basically under a pine canopy. Direct sunlight, you definitely don't want to do. Strong winds, close to a water source is ideal. So if you've got it in the middle of the pavement, that's definitely not ideal.
Sure.
Up against the house even works a lot of times, as long as you kind of don't go southwest aspect.
Okay.
So that will sit there 6 months or so. I've had it go that fast. Sometimes it takes as long as 12, depending on the weathers and such, and when you harvested the log and when you inoculate it. Now, we didn't talk about that. I mean, you can harvest wood that's been down as long as 6 months. The longer you wait, the more likely some other competition has moved in.
Mm-hmm. I wondered about that because so you're talking about other species of mushrooms that might be just in that wood or
Competing for the same resources that you want to grow your food on.
And you don't know if that's a chicken of the wood or a hen of the peck or
Or a magic mushroom.
lion of the mane or whatever. You don't know what kind of mushrooms grow in there. Or I wouldn't know.
We're going to talk foraging one day, but I got to. Now, most of that's never going to be anything that's going to look anything remotely like what you've put in there.
Okay.
Good.
You got your turkey tail, your false turkey tail, but all that's just it's just eating the food that you're trying to use.
Mm-hmm.
Once it's been sitting down there for about 6 months to a year, and you may even see it actually start to fruit and do little volunteers along the way, which go for them, eat them, they're great. But once you can start to see a chocolate and a white star pattern on the end caps of these logs, that's a good indication that it has filled up with that mycelium, and you can start fruiting it if you want. Back to that forced fruiting, setting up that rotation we were talking about.
Okay.
Best way to do that is just got to grab it, pop it on the ground so it simulates a trauma, like a tree fell over essentially, limb broke off, and then soak it, which stimulates the monsoons and the rain seasons. After that, it's stacking and waiting. You can stack it up kind of like Lincoln logs. You can stack it up in kind of an A-frame. You can prop it up against the house, whatever really works. My recommendation is really just kind of keep a place with visual where you can kind of keep an eye on it, because this is the point where it's going to start fruiting. Sometimes that happens really fast. And if it's a drier weather, if you're kind of doing it in, October-ish, that's going to be warm still in the front part of the month, and sometimes you need to get a water hose out there a little bit. But that's really just kind of July and August, maybe a touch of September, maybe once a week if it hasn't rained. That's why I recommend that water source.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as soaking goes, we're talking full submersion. You can use anything. I've seen people use Rubbermaid trash cans, obviously the clean ones. I've seen them use the $1 kiddie pools at a Dollar General. I've seen the one at Chuck Swan actually is a broken 500-gallon spray tank, but it was broken at the top, and manager out there cut it off at the mark, and that is now my large tank.
For soaking the logs for your classes.
And that was a useless, broken item that now serves a great purpose. You don't have to go spend the money to do that.
I think that's the most fascinating part of it is it's a $30 investment, and you can grow. I don't know how much mushrooms cost in the store. I don't buy them regularly, but several hundreds of dollars worth of food there that you got a very small investment in. Huh?
What is that? I saw a half pound of shiitake, local grocery store. These were large production grown, indoor grown, arguably the lower quality, but they were still half pound, I think, at $9 or so.
Oh, wow.
$9 for half a pound. Because I was curious, you mentioned 1 pound earlier. Is that per log that you think you get? So 1 pound of mushroom, that's a lot of mushroom because that stuff's light, right? I mean, it's not in weight.
The shiitake's got a good density to it.
Okay.
I mean, is it really heavy? No. I mean, you're getting a good amount out of a pound.
So I'm just thinking like a plastic grocery bag full. What would that? Is that a pound or is that?
No, it's gonna be quite a bit more.
Okay, so you're looking maybe 5 pounds. I don't know. Just don't spitball in here.
So the medium-sized strawberry crate.
Okay.
That's roughly about 2/3, maybe a pound.
Okay.
So not a huge amount.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it weighs out decently. It also depends on when you harvest. If I was going to sell these, I would want the cap to be a little smaller, a little still pulled in, to this way when it's sitting there going to the market, it can still unfrill and still be super tasty a week later, 4 days later when it's in their fridge. But if this is yours in your own yard, then you're going to cook that right then, and you can, kind of let it do its thing a little more.
So so you've got these grown, and you've got how many logs out there? What's the process of putting it away and storing it? Do you freeze them? Do you, dry them out? What's the best way to save your
great question.
The excess,
your bounty?
The bounty, yeah. Let's say on day 5, you're kind of like, all right, we're gonna not eat shiitake today.
Yeah.
You can actually dry shiitake. It does it really well. As far as I personally have done the freezings. I know some people that kind of do like a half saute and then they'll freeze them. They say there's a lot of other species you can do it, like chicken in the woods. So they recommend that because that's a species that doesn't dry well.
Okay.
So it really depends on the particular mushroom you're after. The nice thing with oyster and shiitake is they both rehydrate very well also.
So you could dry those out and rehydrate them. And the other, you said cook them and then freeze them. Don't freeze them as is. That wouldn't make sense.
Right, that wouldn't work quite as well. You're right.
Interesting.
So this we did this 1 year. Let's say that year of growing season's over. Did they come back next year without any additional?
Right. So there's a few different camps. You got to use a knife and cut it, close to the ground. Don't disturb the soil. And then there's others that'll just pull. And the whole argument to it is that's essentially kind of like an apple off of a tree as opposed to pulling the actual branch. The organism, the mycelium, that organism in the ground is substantially larger than the fruiting mushroom that is essentially a sex organ. Mm-hmm. I haven't seen anything done by either method that never came back again.
Okay. That helps.
I would make the recommendation of cutting solely for the fact of if you're going on foraging or harvesting off the log, when you pull you've got a pinch of a bit of dirt towards the bottom, and that as you throw it in your bag with your other mushrooms, you're making your job harder when you get home of cleaning. So if you can do a cleaner harvest before you put it in the bag, you're setting yourself up for an easier time later. So I cut, but that's because of that reason there, more or less.
Great advice.
Yeah.
Never grown or cut any of them. The only mushrooms I've ever picked are morels, just because I can identify them. And you're out there turkey hunting in the spring or whatever, you find them anyway. So switch gears just a little bit and talk a little bit about foraging mushrooms, morels. People love to find them. Anytime we post something about morels in the spring, everybody's interested in them.
Oh, it doesn't matter what time of year I have a class. If it's middle of turkey season, which I definitely do because it gets the interest, but if I do it in September or November, there's always within the third question of, can I do this with morels or how do I get morels?
Good question.
Unfortunately, you cannot do this method with morels. Morels are a soil-based species, kind of like chanterelles are. So this wouldn't work for those guys. Now, we were talking about how to harvest and what you should and shouldn't do. I do want to say as you cook, you should always cook. Shiitakes, morel, any of them, you should cook them thoroughly. 10 to 15 works really well for me, depending on what I'm doing. I always saute them up before I add them into a pasta or another dish as well. I don't rely on the dish itself to cook those mushrooms. There's really very few mushrooms that are truly deadly to a person, but the amount of other problems you can cause yourself are substantial.
Yeah.
Gastric issues. Yeah, you just don't ever want to leave the restroom.
I don't want none of that.
No, I don't think so.
Well, what about a portobello before you go?
Oh, the portobello.
Can you grow them at home?
Yeah, but if you're growing gourmet mushrooms and you're going to invest, I'd just stay with shiitake.
They're better?
They are.
Okay. I don't know much about mushrooms.
Oh, I'm shiitake that you even asked the question.
That's about my knowledge of Todd on the other end of the camera here. We should have had him out here because he's got picture after picture of these different mushrooms with some funky names that these two are talking about. So
yeah,
Todd might have been a better.
That'll be on a forage and ID kind of day, not a
growing your own.
Not a culture day, I suppose.
Gotcha.
Well, after this little lesson here, I might have to come out to one of your classes and
sure.
experience that and understand it even more. So it's been interesting. I really appreciate you.
But before you go, where can folks
by.
find out more about growing their own mushrooms in the meantime before you have another class? What's a good resource?
Sure. You're always welcome to email me, state email and such, but also everything mushroom.
What's your email?
My email? Oh, goodness. That is jeffrey.d.collins-key@tn.gov.
Gotcha.
You're more than welcome to email me and ask any questions. Most of my resources are coming out of Everything Mushroom. If you're looking to do more of a large scale or business concept, I would recommend Cornell Small Farms. They've done a huge study about market viability and things of this nature. They've got a lot of good templates and help out there as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here. Thanks for sharing this information with us. And this is Tennessee WildCast, and we appreciate you tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Stay connected with TWRA by visiting our website at tnwildlife.org and follow us on Facebook, X, and Instagram. You can invest in Tennessee's wildlife future by purchasing a license at GoOutdoorsTennessee.com. That's GoOutdoorsTennessee.com.